Well, we want to discuss why creation is such an important issue. You know, I can go and talk about, how did dinosaurs go on Noah's Ark? How did people live to be 900 years old? And where did Cain get his wife? Those type of things in our Dinosaurs Ice Age Pre-Flood World DVD. But the bottom line is that people go home and think, wow, those are great answers, but it doesn't really set in their hearts. They don't understand why this is such an important issue. When we talked about creation philosophy for evangelism, we showed you that statistics are showing that people are leaving the church simply because they don't believe that this is true, that the Bible is the Word of God, that creation is true, and as a result, if creation isn't true, why would the rest of the Bible be true? But even more so than that, we're seeing that it is destroying the moral fabric of our society. And that is why creation is such an important issue. You see, today, many people think that the creation-evolution debate is just a simple side issue. We have more important things to worry about. I mean, what about homosexuality? What about pornography? What about abortion? I mean, aren't these things that we ought to be attacking and going after those things, not wasting our time with this divisive issue of creation versus evolution? Well, I want to show you that the creation-evolution debate is at the very root, the very heart of all these other issues. These other issues spring up from the root of evolution. When we look at this, you're going to see that this is ultimately where lawlessness comes from. This is ultimately where homosexuality is going to stem from, and pornography and all of these kinds of things. As a matter of fact, if I would give you a definition of what science is, it is basically this. It is a total collection of knowledge gained by man's observation of the physical world around him, using one or more of his five senses, taste, hearing, smell, sight, or touch, to investigate the world around him, and then those observations can be repeated. But the key is this: true science is what can be observed, tested, seen, using our senses to be able to measure it. If you can't see it or touch it today, guess what, guys? It's not science. We don't see evolution happening today, do we? No, we don't see animals turning into people. No, we see people behaving like animals because of evolution, but we don't see animals turning into people. This isn't there. Now, this is not a slam against President Clinton here. But I want you to understand something. That there is a big difference between this ape and President Clinton. President Clinton is an intelligent human being. That monkey, that ape, that's just a dumb animal. A huge difference between these two. You see, that animal is two-dimensional. President Clinton is three-dimensional. That animal has a body, as does Clinton. That animal has a soul, as does Clinton. That animal has nothing more, but Clinton has a three-dimensional aspect. He has a spiritual nature. And we are not dumb animals. But yet evolution wants to make you think that that's all this is. It's just a matter of getting these genetic changes to take place so that, millions of years of genes changing, you can get from a monkey to a man. No, it's so much more than that. There is a spiritual difference between an animal and a man. And we need to understand that. Now, I can show you this scripturally real quickly. If you look in Genesis chapter 1, the very first verses here we see, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now that word create is to make out of nothing. Okay, man can't create anything. You guys can make a cake. You can, make a car, but we're really not creating anything. We're taking things that God has created, we're using that to form and fashion things. Now, that word create, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. That means that He created, all the materials that we would need to make stuff. At that point, the elements, nitrogen, hydrogen, all those gases, all these things are put together right there. If you look carefully as you go through these days of creation, that word create is not used again. You often see that God created the sun, moon, and stars. Well, yes, He did, but you also have to realize it doesn't say that. It says He made them. He created everything that you needed in the sun, moon, and stars right there in Genesis 1:1. And then He forms and fashions it into the sun, the moon, and the stars. That word create is not used again until the fifth day of creation. Go check it out. But what does that mean? That means on the fifth day, something is coming about that was not there on the first 4 days that now has to be brought into existence. What's new on day 5 that wasn't there on the first 4 days of creation? Life. Living things. Life came about. You know, everybody wants to find out where life began. Right there it is. God creates it. And the word for life there is nephesh. It's the same word used for soul. The life of a creature is in its blood. The nephesh of a creature is in its blood. Literally, the soul of a creature is in its blood. If you have blood, you've got a soul, biblically speaking. Now, day 6 comes around, and He creates man. See, day 5, He creates sea creatures and birds, living creatures. But day 6, if He already has the dirt to make man, if He already has the soul to put it in man, why does He have to create something new on the 6th day that wasn't there on the first 5 days? Because you are unique. You're not an animal. He put that spiritual nature as He breathed the breath of God into us. We became not just a living creature, but a spirit-filled creature. And so keep that in mind. As we're talking about this, science just wants to make this all natural, genetics. We can only, through empirical science find truth. No, how much does love weigh? We don't know. You can't scientifically prove love. Likewise, the spiritual nature, we don't really understand it, but we know it's there. It gives us the ability to reason, to have a conscience, to be able to worship in God in unique ways that animals do not have. Animals have emotions. They'll pee on the carpet when they get scared, right? They come home and they're all excited to see you, but you put a spiritual nature in there and it heightens that. And so animals are different. In our Amazing Animals presentation, we will talk more about that and the differences between monkey and a man. But for now, I just want you to see that we don't see animals turning into people, and you never will. There's much more of a difference than just what we've talked about here. But what I want you to remember is this, that if it is not observable in the present, if you can't see it and touch it, then it is not science. It is that simple. You see, in rare circumstances, we have here a dinosaur bone. Now, this dinosaur bone, when it was dug up, it didn't have, some diary that we found with it telling me what it looked like or how it died, what its favorite food was, or who it liked to hang out with on Friday night. All it said was, well, I'm dead. And frankly, I didn't even hear it say that. I just assumed, since I was holding its bone in my hand, that it was dead. You see, these things are simply rocks that are in the shape of what they used to be. That's all this is. A rock. We go to these museums, though, and they show a dinosaur biting another dinosaur's tail or on top of its neck, and we think, wow, look at what happened. No, that's not what happened. That's their artistic idea. That's their imagination. Rocks don't tell us these things. A rock is just a rock. You see, a fossil is simply a rock that's, replaced slowly, little bits at a time, turn that into a rock so that it keeps the shape of what it used to be, but nonetheless, it's still a rock. And scientists want us to believe that we can tell all these amazing things from a rock? No. Fossils only tell us about the present because they only exist in the present. Now, this woolly mammoth tooth is not a fossil. This is the real thing. This came out of a woolly mammoth in Alaska that was coming out of the glaciers. So now in this case, I can tell you what the woolly mammoth ate, because it's not a rock, it's the real thing. We even find these things standing frozen perfectly upright. The food that they were eating is still in their teeth. It's even undigested in their stomachs in some cases. So now, scientifically, I can observe, I can look and see what woolly mammoth ate, so I can tell you that is a scientific fact, because we've observed it. You could smell it. If you wanted, you could eat it. Matter of fact, some people have even eaten woolly mammoth steak dinners. Some people over there, the Eskimos, would feed them to their dogs, use it as dog food. That is science. But can you see the difference? One we can observe, and the other one we have nothing to go on outside of our imaginations and art. That is a big difference. If I would give you a definition of what evolution is, it's this. It's a belief about the past based upon words of scientists who were not there, who do not know everything, and who are trying to explain evidence which, well, only exists in the present. How did it get here? And that's where science falls short, because, guys, we don't know. These woolly mammoths that are standing frozen, have you ever wondered how to freeze an elephant before? No, you can't freeze an elephant. It doesn't fit in the freezer, and even if it did, you couldn't freeze an elephant. We've asked people at Birds Eye Frozen Foods, how do you freeze an elephant? After they got over the question, they tell us, well, you see, you couldn't freeze an elephant because this is why we cut beef up before you hang it up in the freezer. Because in a day's time, about 12 inches of it would freeze is all. That means the heat would get locked in on the inside and the insides would rot. That's not good. So to freeze an elephant solid, you'd have to have temperatures they think of up maybe 300 degrees below zero. We don't get those temperatures on Earth naturally, do we? This speaks of a catastrophe. Now, there are different opinions as far as how that could happen, because not all of them are like that. But it begs the question, how could this happen? We can only make guesses. Some have proposed that comets came busting into the atmosphere because they have temperatures of that degree, and it began to snow comets in a sense. They got buried in this snow, which is why they're still standing up, because they couldn't sit down. Others, like Michael Lord, and I think this is probably a better explanation, he just talks about after the flood we had an ice age. And you're going to have temperature changes there that we don't normally see today. Drastic temperature changes. And normally an animal would put its rear end so that the wind is blowing it against that rather than its head. And then all this silt and whatnot blows up against it as it's standing there, and it would still be alive for quite a while, but then it can just kind of almost sit down on this silty kind of thing, because that's what we see when they're buried. They're not always buried in ice, that there's silt up pretty high up on their legs. So who knows? We can only make theories. This is where science comes to an end. I just know that they were frozen alive. We can't explain exactly why. To be 100% correct about anything, you need to have a couple of requirements. Number one, you need to have been there to observe it. If you weren't there to see it, it can't be science, right? And the second thing you'd have to have is you'd have to be, well, omniscient, all-knowing, to know everything. I'm pretty sure all of you fall short on those. You weren't there to see creation, were you? And you don't know everything. Maybe some of you think you do, but you don't. You see, but that's exciting to me, because I do know somebody who was there, who does know everything. God, my Creator. And not only was He there, and not only is He omniscient, but He even left me a record called the Holy Scriptures, the Bible, to tell me what happened. So already I've got a foot up on the evolutionists, because I have a record to tell me what happened. They don't. Ken Ham, he used to say this. He says, no matter how much you know, there's always an infinite amount more to know. Which means no matter how much you know, you don't know how much more there is to know anyway, which means you don't know how much you do or don't know, which means you just don't know much at all. You see, ask a scientist, is it true that science has changed in the past because we found new evidence? Oh, yeah. So you mean we're going to continue to find new evidence, and our interpretation of science will continue to change then? Oh, certainly. So we really can't be sure about anything that's out there then. Yeah, really, we can't. So we really can't, know everything about anything? No, we can't. So we really can't be sure about evolution? Oh, no. Evolution, that's a fact. That is the mindset that we are dealing with here today. You can challenge anything unless it's the very foundation of evolution that's true. And you probably have noticed, evolution isn't even called a theory anymore in our schools. It's now called a fact. How can that be if it's not observable? We don't observe it happening today. You pick up a newspaper and you will see that they are constantly changing their minds. Every week in the newspaper, something new has been found, changing the current believed scientific theory that they're saying is a fact. Constantly. Do you guys know, as a teacher, I used to be a teacher, if I would have come into the classroom and said, hey kids, I want you to understand 5 plus 5 is 10. And the kids write that down. Oh, okay, all right, I got it down. And the next day I came in and I said, wait a minute, I did some more research. 5 plus 5, in the next chapter I learned it's actually 22. Kids go, all right, they erase that and they write it down. And about 2 weeks later, I come in and say, kids, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I read a little bit more. 5 plus 5 is actually 10 again. How many weeks am I going to get by with this until they don't believe anything I have to say? Probably week number 2, right? Yeah, yet we continue to hold these scientists in such great esteem, yet they can't make up their minds. They keep changing their minds. Why do we keep believing them? When obviously they're showing us they don't know what's going on? Bottom line too, guys, let's say that I came in and I said, guys, what is 5 plus 5? But whoa, before you answer, you cannot say 10. And by the way, you cannot say, like things like 55. You can't use sign language or other languages. Diez, estre. You can't use any other language. You can't use combinations of adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. What's 5 plus 5? Anybody want to take a guess? 17? Sure. Yeah, that works. Yeah. Anybody else want to try it? 105? Yep, that'll work. Yeah, 2,550? That'll work. You bet. You guys, any number you want will work. Why? Because when I remove the only possibility of what truth is, anything but truth becomes acceptable, doesn't it? And this is the world we're living in. They're saying, we can't talk about creation, we can't talk about God, and as a result, then anything but truth has become acceptable. That's the world we're living in. But the Bible is the only key to the past. The Bible is the only key to our understanding. It must be the foundation for every thought we have. We must have a biblical world view if we are going to find truth, guys. And yet they've kicked that Bible out, so how can we have even an opinion if the foundation of all of our thinking isn't allowed? It's not an accident they're trying to kick the Bible out of schools. Do you know that the Bible, Genesis specifically, is found 200 times in the New Testament? No, I didn't mess up. New Testament, Genesis is found. 165 verses are quoted. Some of those verses quoted more than once, bringing the total to over 200 times that you can find Genesis in the New Testament. Every single New Testament author quotes it at least one time. Jesus himself quotes it many times. Why is a book that's considered to be so important in Jesus' day, now in our day, considered to be one of the most mocked at, scoffed at, chewed out, spit up books that we have? Well, I think the answer can be found in Genesis. But before I give you that answer, I want you to answer this question. Who wrote Genesis? Who wrote Genesis? Moses. That's what the Bible says. And do you know in John chapter 5, verses 45 through 47, Jesus we see saying this, "Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuseth you, even Moses in whom you trust. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed my word," said Jesus. Do you hear what he's saying? If you would have believed Moses, if you would have believed Genesis, you'd believe my words. But if you can't believe Genesis, why would you believe Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Guys, if you can't believe the first part of the Bible, Satan knows you won't believe the rest of it. You won't believe the miracles of Jesus. Think about it. Are the miracles of God creating the world any greater than the miracles of Jesus raising people from the dead, turning water into wine, ascending into heaven, walking through walls, or any of these other things? A virgin birth? No. So why do you believe the miracles in the New Testament, but you can't believe the ones in the Old? Well, the ones in the Old just don't seem to be scientifically accurate. Well, first of all, they are scientifically accurate. And second of all, let me ask you this. You guys believe that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary? Why? What scientific proof do you have of that? None, do you? As a matter of fact, even if you lived back in Jesus' day,